Hello, one and all, and welcome to Karen's class, where we live, laugh, and learn that learning is fundamental. In this class, we will be deepening our understanding of sentence structure by reviewing dependent and independent clauses and tying it all together in a summative paraphrasing exercise in this fourth and final segment of our four-part series all about the art of paraphrasing. If you've stuck around from the beginning, congratulations on your newly acquired knowledge. If you haven't yet seen parts 1, 2, and 3, why don't you go check them out in the descriptions below. Now, put on your thinking caps and let's get started. In our 3 previous classes, we learned the 3-step method of paraphrasing. In the first lesson, we looked over what exactly the 3-step method is. Then we applied it to a paragraph from Erich Fromm. Remember? From our second lesson onwards, we have been taking deeper dives into each of these 3 steps and what they entail grammatically, lexically, and otherwise. Today, we'll be going over everything you need to know about sentence structure to be the best paraphrasing virtuoso that you can be. So, let's dive right in. When we talk about changing sentence structure, it can feel like the most daunting step of all. This is because you have to take apart the entire structure and rebuild what you have dismantled. Students often tell me that they don't know where to start, or they lack the confidence to go any deeper. Let me demystify that for you. When restructuring the grammatical building blocks of a sentence, all you need to know are how independent or dependent clauses operate, and what different combinations of sentence types they can be restructured into. So, what exactly is a sentence again? A sentence is a set of words that contain a subject and a predicate. Well, what's a predicate? This is a predicate. A predicate is any part of the sentence that talks about the subject, describing it and telling you what it does. Also, keep in mind that a sentence must be a complete thought. Otherwise, it is considered a sentence fragment. For example, the sweet puppy, the cute bunny, and all those wicked evil creatures. These are not sentences, but the sweet puppy wagged its tail. What a cute bunny she is! And avenge your namesake and go wreak vengeance upon all those wicked evil creatures. These are all sentences. You probably also already know that every sentence must begin with the capitalized letter and end with the punctuation mark. Moving on. You may remember that sentences can be grouped into 4 different types, depending on the reason the sentence is used. Declarative, interrogative, imperative, and exclamative. First, a declarative sentence just tells you a situation flat outright. It can also be called a telling sentence for that very reason. Examples of declarative sentences can be, I am happy. She is sad. They put the cat in the washing machine, but I rescued it just in time. Second, an interrogative sentence is also called a question sentence. Examples of interrogative sentences can be, are you happy? Is he sad? And why would they put a cat in the washing machine? Interrogative sentences can begin with a question word, such as what, why, or which. Or the action verb, which would normally have either been left unsaid or placed after the subject noun, can be placed in front of the noun to start the sentence. For example, you are happy becomes, are you happy? He is sad becomes, is he sad? And so on. Either way, interrogative sentences usually end with the question mark. Third, we have the imperative sentence, which literally has you talking imperially, like an emperor telling people to do this or do that. It can also be called a command or a commanding sentence. Examples of interrogative sentences can be, get better soon. Go to the bakery and buy her a cake. And, Don't put your cat in the washing machine. Finally, we have the exclamative sentence, also called the exclamation. Exclamative sentences end with exclamation marks. Examples of exclamative sentences can be, "What a terrible situation," "I've never tasted a cake this wonderful," and "Poor kitty cat." Now that we're on the same page as to how to understand a sentence, we'll now go on to see what independent and dependent clauses are. So, what are independent or dependent clauses? An independent clause is a group of words that contains a subject and verb and expresses a complete thought. An independent clause can stand on its own as a sentence. A dependent clause, also known as a subordinate clause, is a group of words that contains a subject and a verb, but does not express a complete thought. A dependent clause cannot be a sentence. Let's look at some examples. Remember that an independent clause is a group of words with a subject and a verb, which expresses a complete thought. Well, an independent clause must also be able to stand on its own as a sentence. Here are some examples of independent clauses. I eat an apple. Okay, so far so good. But what about Sarah eats, sings, and laughs? You can have more than one verb in an independent clause, so far as the verb agrees with the subject. And what if there are two nouns in the subject, like in Jimmy and Karen play the guitar? That's fine. That's what we call a compound subject. Both Jimmy and Karen play the guitar. In an independent clause, a compound subject can have many nouns, and there can be many different verbs in the sentence. That doesn't mean it's not an independent clause. It still is an independent clause. Now recall that a dependent clause is a group of words that contains a subject and a verb, but does not express a complete thought. And a dependent clause cannot be a sentence. Often, a dependent clause is marked by a dependent marker word, also known as a subordinating conjunction, such as after, although, as if, because, before, even if, even though, if, in order to, since, though, unless, until, whatever, when, whenever, whether, and while. In these example sentences, while I eat an apple, my sister Sarah eats, sings, and laughs. And although Jimmy and Karen play the guitar, Kurt, Steve, and Sarah each play the guitar, the violin, and the synthesizer. Because they start with the dependent marker words or coordinating conjunctions circled in red, while and although, these clauses cannot be sentences, no matter how long or complex they are, even regardless of the number of nouns and verbs in these clauses. They cannot stand alone as sentences, and therefore are dependent clauses. Now let's look closely at different types of sentences based on sentence structure. There are 4 main types of sentences based on sentence structure: simple sentences, complex sentences, compound sentences, and compound complex sentences. First, let's look at the simple sentence. Now, a simple sentence is a sentence that consists of just one independent clause. For example, you have sentences such as, I am human, she is a girl, that is a cat, and the complexities of the universe are vast, inexhaustible, and mysterious. Note that a simple sentence can seem complicated and not really simple. This has nothing to do with the fact that it is in fact a simple sentence. A simple sentence has no dependent clauses, but this does not limit the number of adjectival phrases, adjectives, verbs, or number of nouns within a compound subject. Now, the verbs have been circled in green, and everything past the green verb is a predicate. enclosed in a purple square. Remember, we learned about predicates within sentences earlier in this lesson. Also note that the subject of each sentence has been underlined in red in these examples, and the predicate contains the verb as well as the objects or the adjectival phrases of these sentences. Now let's look at complex sentences. A complex sentence is a sentence that consists of one independent clause and at least one dependent clause. Now, remember that dependent clauses cannot stand alone as sentences, and a sentence must contain at least one independent clause to be considered a sentence. Note that the independent clause here is underlined in green. Now let's look at this example. Because the stray kitten was only 3 weeks old, it could barely open its eyes, although it could meow so loud that it woke the entire neighborhood at 3 a.m. with its sorrowful cries. Meow. Emotionally, structurally, keep in mind that a complex sentence uses subordinating conjunctions like because, since, or until to connect clauses. Here we see that there are 2 dependent clauses within this single sentence, one before and one after the independent clause. And sure enough, each dependent clause starts with the subordinating conjunction, also known as a dependent marker word, remember, to connect these clauses. But what if you don't have any dependent clauses in a sentence? What if the sentence is made up entirely of multiple independent clauses? Well, that's certainly something that happens. It's called a compound sentence. A compound sentence is a sentence that consists of 2 or more independent clauses joined by either a coordinating conjunction like and or but, or a semicolon. Let's read this example sentence. The sweet little lamb ate her fill of grass, and the cute little kitten frolicked in the garden. It was another beautiful day on the Halcyon Animal Sanctuary. A point of vocabulary here. Halcyon is another word for heavenly. Note that this sentence consists of 3 independent clauses joined together. Because an independent clause can also stand alone as a grammatical sentence on its own, we can even divvy up this single sentence back into the sum of its parts. 3 sentences that can stand separately on their own. The sweet little lamb ate her fill of grass. The cute little kitten frolicked in the garden. It was another beautiful day on the Halcyon Animal Sanctuary. And how are they joined into one lovely sentence? That's right, we have the coordinating conjunction and, as well as the semicolon, acting like mortar between bricks to cement these 3 independent clauses into one wonderful, pretty little compound sentence. Next, let's look at the 4th and final structural sentence type, the compound complex sentence. A compound complex sentence is a sentence that consists of 2 or more independent clauses and 1 or more dependent clause. Now, how would that work? Let's look at these examples. Here are 2 independent clauses. I enjoy baking cookies, and Sasha enjoys making fudge. Now, if you add them together with the coordinating conjunction and, you get I enjoy baking cookies and Sasha enjoys making fudge. This is a compound sentence because you have joined 2 independent clauses together with a coordinating conjunction. And if you add a subordinating conjunction, although, you get the compound complex sentence. I enjoy baking cookies and Sasha enjoys making fudge, although we don't actually like eating what we create. To sum up, a simple sentence is 1 independent clause. For example, I bite eagerly. into this lovely, sweet, crisp apple. A complex sentence is one independent clause plus a subordinating conjunction that begins one or more dependent clauses. For example, I bite eagerly into this lovely, sweet, crisp apple because I am very hungry. Next, a compound sentence is made up of two or more independent clauses joined together by a coordinating conjunction or two or three, and or a semicolon. For example, I bite eagerly into this lovely, sweet, crisp apple, but Sasha goes hungry. Next, a compound complex sentence is made up of two or more independent clauses plus one or more dependent clauses, which means, of course, that the dependent clause or clauses begin with the subordinating conjunction or conjunctions. An example of a compound complex sentence would be something like, while I am hungry and tired, I also happen to be busy. I can't eat, and rest is not an option. If we simplify this further, you got it. It's not too hard at all. Now let's put it all together. Let's take a look at these sentences, which have been taken often erroneously or out of context from a theoretical work by someone named Karl Marx. I'll read the quote. Religious suffering is, at one and the same time, the expression of real suffering and a protest against real suffering. Religion is the sigh of the oppressed creature, the heart of a heartless world, and the soul of soulless conditions. It is the opium of the people. This is a quote taken from Karl Marx's A Contribution to the Critique of Hegel's Philosophy of Right. It's often misquoted or simplified and vulgarized into the condensed version. Religion is the opium of the people. It's often meant to give a certain Marxist or socialist idea a mechanistically atheist slant. But is that really what it means? Let's try breaking this quote into its constituent parts and try paraphrasing it to really delve deeper into the underlying meaning. Here we see that the independent clauses have been underlined in green, and there are three grammatical subjects to these clauses: religious suffering, religion, and it. Again, these are encircled in yellow. Now, religious suffering, according to Karl Marx, is different from religion itself, and you have to read the full text carefully in order to really understand intuitively what that subtle but distinct differentiation entails. It is a pronoun that refers to religion, so it's safe to say that the signified meanings of it and religion are aligned, i.e., religion is the referent of the pronoun it. What's interesting in a sentence like this is that the second and third phrases, the expression of real suffering and a protest against real suffering, are not really independent clauses, but can be altered to be read as such, because they form the predicate part of the subject. Religious suffering is, etc. Therefore, it is implied that the subject of the full sentence is also the subject within the phrases themselves, though this is not explicitly stated. As they stand, these phrases would be sentence fragments, but they can be reworded into independent clauses as seen to the right. Religious suffering is the expression of real suffering, and it is a protest against real suffering. Here, the real suffering is also something that must be distinguished from religious suffering within the philosophy of Marx. We can do the same for the other sentence fragment phrases by turning them into independent clauses. Religion is the sigh of the oppressed creature. Religion is the heart of a heartless world. Religion is the soul of soulless conditions. Religion is the opium of the people. Got it? Good. Moving on. Now let's work a little clausal reconstruction magic on this gem of a paragraph. First, we can change the order of the clauses. Also, while we're at it, we can replace some nouns and verbs with their synonyms, as highlighted in pink and purple. Real has been turned into true. Religion has been turned into its various different denotations, such as a creed and a prayer, faith, and spirituality. Opium, used here metaphorically, has been turned into its more general synonym, drug. The people has been turned into downtrodden masses. And the sigh has been turned into a release of pent-up breath. Heart has been turned into the beating center. Heartless into faithless, because if A equals B and B equals C, then C equals A. And finally, spirit and soul have been used interchangeably. The suffix less in soulless has been opened up into the full value of its meaning by being replaced with devoid of soul. You may have noticed that we changed an independent clause into a dependent clause here by making it start with the subordinating conjunction or dependent marker word, although, highlighted in red. You may also have noticed that we also changed the orders of the sentences around by putting the central sentence first and joining the other clauses with the subordinating conjunction because. Let's take a minute to let it all sink in. Got it? Good. Now let's look at our finished paraphrase. Recall that the original read, religious suffering is, at one and the same time, the expression of real suffering and a protest against real suffering. Religion is the sigh of the oppressed creature, the heart of a heartless world, and the soul of soulless conditions. It is the opium of the people. This has now been paraphrased. Religious suffering is also a protest against true suffering, although it expresses true suffering. Religion is the drug of the downtrodden masses, because a creed and a prayer are the oppressed creature's release of pent-up breath. Faith is the beating center of a faithless world, and spirituality is the spirit of conditions devoid of soul. As you can see, the rewording of the first sentence honors and brings into higher relief the originally intended paradox. Religious suffering is simultaneously an expression of real suffering and a protest against real suffering, even though it is not true suffering itself. The second and third sentence of the original have been fused together into one, with the drug reference placed at the beginning as the leading independent clause. Overall, this rewording demystifies the implications of diction, such as opium, through the employment of synonyms and switching of clause order. Used metaphorically, opium is historically context-specific and was widely available as a sort of tonic at the time Marx wrote this paragraph. It was even used to pacify colicky babies. Obviously, like it has with radium or lead in paint and food, science has steadily caught on to the addictive destruction and toxicity of many substances such as opium, and in the time since Marx wrote these sentences, the word has steadily acquired ever worsening levels of nefarious connotations. Now, I'm not saying that the true implications of this full quote alone are sufficient in negating the statement that Marx was an atheist, or Marx was a theist, or an agnostic, or even if or why any of that even matters. That's beyond the scope of this lesson. But whenever a complex thinker's body of work is referenced in a militant and simplified, vulgarized way, you have to look at the author's intent and be as critical as possible while honing your intuition as a reader and getting to the heart of what is being said. In this regard, paraphrasing is excellent training and practice in getting you deeper into that heady, focused, intensified next level of comprehension, no matter how dense the text you are dealing with. Well, congratulations! You're officially a syntax master paraphrasing virtuoso now. This has been lesson 4 of 4 in our series, How to Paraphrase, How to Change Sentence Structure. If you've made it this far from the beginning, we commend you for keeping your thinking cap on. Thank you for joining Karen's class. I hope you learned something, and I'll be back with more videos. So please subscribe and like this video for more helpful content and helping you become the best writer that you can be. See you next time, and until then, keep your thinking cap on.